I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a real treat, fascinating individual. I just want to give you a little bit about his background before we start. He was a contractor for Microsoft, and he would fly all over the world for the toughest, most difficult software problems for Microsoft. Actually, he was a contractor. They didn't have anybody inside Microsoft that actually did what Cliff High did. I'm talking about Cliff High of halfpasthuman.com. He is a data mining expert, has predictive linguistics, what he calls it, and he puts out these fabulous reports. Cliff High, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Nice to see you, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you on. I know your website is halfpasthuman.com. I just want to get that out off the top. And your latest report is out. It's out. It's nearly 40 pages. I was joking with you in the pre-interview saying, I'm just going to skim this, for the so I can prepare myself. I end up with 8, square notepads, 4x4 notepads of notes, which I can't get to it all. And it really is just an eye-opener report. And I just want to start with summation. And I thought your summation was really important. And I just wrote down, jig is up for the deep state. That, they've been training us and pulling a scam on us for 60, 70 years, and that is over. Can you please talk about the jig is up for the deep state?
Sure. It actually has to do with less with the deep state per se than our evolution under their oppression. So we've been living in a situation where they've been controlling the narrative, controlling all our language and what we were allowed to speak about and the intensity. And it ultimately led this rigidification to what we call political correctness. But at the same time that was going on, people naturally rebelled against it any way they could. And so they internally became more complex. And we see this with the younger generations knowing more, having more facts at their disposal, being able to call BS on stuff more rapidly, and looking for nuance in things at a level where when I was at their age, I was merely trying to absorb facts. So the level of complexity of the humans themselves has increased, and that was the factor that the deep state did not take into account. They kept their rigid mindset, their rigid rules, their compartmentalization, and kept everything so boxed in that even they were unaware that humanity has evolved out and around their obstruction. So the deep state is dying simply because the knowledge of it is now so prevalent. And basically the knowledge itself is going to crush the deep state.
I want to lead right into the next thing, and that is that the deep state, the oligarchs, whatever you want to call it, they're doing a fighting retreat. Is that what this attack on Trump is about, and attack on Jeff Sessions, that, he talked to the Russian ambassador. He was part of the Armed Services Committee. That was his job. The ambassador that supposedly that Sessions talked to and made 22 visits to the White House. When you're the Russian ambassador to the United States, you're a pretty popular guy. Charles Schumer, is there having drinks with, people like, Putin and that kind of thing. This whole, the Russians are coming. It's all BS, right? Is that what you're talking about, a fighting retreat? They're trying to hold on to power by trying to destroy Donald Trump and the people around him, namely Jeff Sessions. Is that right?
I think that they're actually trying to whittle away his support in order to isolate him and neuter him, basically. The fewer people he has that he can trust and make send out to do tasks in an explicit, trustworthy fashion, it really reduces his power base. And so that's their goal, is to remove all of the trustworthy lieutenants that came up along with the revolution. And that's how they see this, as an example of creative revolution. And in all revolutions, you have the charismatic leader followed by a cadre of very hardworking, competent lieutenants who just know how to get stuff done. Usually these people are ideologues. We don't have that this time. We have a bunch of people that are personally loyal and are absent, in so far as I've been able to determine, an ideology basis that makes them into theocrats. And so they're very dangerous to the deep state but less so to the deep state itself than to the powers that be that have been enjoying privilege at the hands of the deep state. You have to understand that our current power elite are worse in their corruption than Caligula or Nero, and we are going through that same level of degradation in our empire. So here we have the revolution that's come on up, and in order to get their way again, so to speak, their goal is to whittle away that staunch level of fierce support at the lieutenant level any way they can, any way they can. So it'll get very dirty and dangerous there. And that's why we're now in the period of chaos that I'd forecast back in the February report.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to work this time. They tried to get rid of Kellyanne Conway. She's not leaving. They did get rid of Michael Flynn, but he replaced her. I don't think they're going to get rid of Jeff Sessions. I just don't think he's going to go. I mean, after all, Eric, I brought this up in my weekly news wrap-up. I mean, Eric Holder was held in contempt of Congress after not turning over records to the Fast and Furious where a border agent was killed where they gave 2,000 guns away. He didn't step down for years.
Right. Well, also part of the tactic is just that it's labeling. Okay, so it's they're actually.
So we have less than 2 weeks before the chaos starts.
They want to have a trial in the public mind, not really get into any kind of legalistic issue at all. And so, in my way of thinking, if you're willing to stand up there and say, "Okay, so you're calling me names, up yours, and I'll come right back at you and call you names too." That really is the appropriate way to deal with this at this point, and to actually force them to become embroiled in the legal system, because they will not. And this is shown repeatedly in the past few years that they can't afford the discovery.
One of the big things that I see is this being ignored, and I want to know if it showed up in your data. These massive arrests by the Trump administration for human sex trafficking. One out in California rendered 28 children. They freed 28 sex trafficked children. They freed this pedophilia, sex trafficking, whatever. Is that showing up in is that showing up in your research? And is that an attack at their power? This quote unquote privilege, which is creepy, of pedophilia in the elite.
Yes, indeed. We discuss it in the report obliquely, because I don't want to give out anything that I should not and impede its progress at all. But it's a very key element here. I don't think of this as that. Maybe one could think of this as sort of one of the privileges of power, this indulgent in pedophilia, but at the same time, it's the way in which they blackmail these people and create a cohesive cadre and get them to abandon their principles. And so it is, at this stage, the linchpin for the power elite that are currently in place. And they're very desperately afraid that any of this should come out. And thus we see very unusual activities in reports, for instance, that Obama is going to lead 30,000 people on a impeachment campaign and a revolution this spring. That the language is just really quite remarkable. Never in any previous election campaign that I've been able to see, except for one in the 1800s, do we have this level of emotional intensity after the election. Now, I also have the emotional intensity.
Stop. I'm just going to interrupt you. Emotional intensity because Trump is going to go after these people, and they're freaking out. Is that
you got it? Oh yeah. Oh, they're desperately afraid. Oh, they're so afraid. It's horrific. I mean, I don't even like processing through the language that I get in what I call the powers that be entity, nor the press entity, simply because the language of fear is just so nasty to keep reading for hours as I do the processing for the report. These people are very desperately afraid for their lives. They're afraid at almost like an ego level that this stuff should not come on out, and at a level that is actually it actually comes out as stronger than you would fear for your life.
Well, look what happened to Danny Hastert, the former Speaker of the House. He got embroiled in a sex scheme with involved children, and he's ruined. He's done. He's toast. You're talking because nobody will buy into this. If you're doing evil stuff to children, you're done. You're done on both sides. Is that right?
that was their plan was, of course, to remove that prohibition against it. Was to, there was all this stuff that was going to be ladled out very rapidly after Hillary had won. For instance, if you look at Chelsea's book that they're not promoting at all, it's a good, interesting read because it lays out exactly what they were after if you read between the lines. And so they were attempting to maneuver the social contract in such a way that pedophilia, cannibalism at the level of the elite would be accepted. And so that
Evil.
has failed.
Pure evil.
Exactly so. And so that has failed. And now, of course, the consequences are that A, it's exposed, and they really had no plan B. Once it's exposed at this level, people either accept it or they fight against it. And so it's kind of like on.
And I don't want you to give up anything, but you're saying that this is going to blow sky high. It is on the track to be totally exposed. It will not be, the genie will not be put back in the bottle in the sex trafficking and pedophilia arena. Is that what you're saying?
That's quite correct. We're at an intergenerational change. Within the generations, we get large themes, if you will, that seem to carry over for decades as these generations adopt them. The generations that are behind me at this point have adopted a more rigid idea of what the social contract is, absent any religion. And that social contract will not allow predation on children. In a year from now, you'll be shocked to see what's going to be going on relative to how corporations conduct business, and especially advertising.
Oh, what do you mean by that? Shocked?
I mean, in the long-term data, we have sets that are saying that, we're going to have committees of people that will be going through past advertising from corporations looking for embedded and subliminal messages, and then they're going to go after those corporations, saying we were damaged by them, we're going to sue you for this. And then there will also be other people that will be saying, no, you can't use those words with that child's face to sell this product. We're not going to do it.
Oh, boy. I want to move on to the banking system. And again, folks, this is a 37, I don't know, nearly 40 pages of report. So I'm just going to ting off some highlights here. And what I got in the report in a couple of different areas is the banks and the derivatives, and whether it's the European banks, namely Italian banks, or banks in California, or banks over here connected with real estate, banks are going to get into big trouble. It's going to expose a gigantic derivative bust. Could you please explain that? Is that correct? Is that what you're seeing? A lot of data on a derivative bust and the banks going down?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because it's showing up as being regional. So it's not going to be like a global derivatives bust all at once. It'll be like a large failure, say in a northern Italian bank, and then the derivatives that are associated with that bank ripple over to Deutsche Bank, and then maybe they're able to contain it a little bit, and so everybody breathes a sigh of relief. But then it breaks out over in Texas, and a bunch of regional banks in Texas shut down, and there's some pressure on some fracking wells, and then they get it contained with a little bit of a credit infusion from somewhere else, and then it spreads to California, and then it hops over to Asia, and then the next thing you know, it's back in Europe. And so we'll be fighting this basically derivatives disease where it'll erupt and pop open there, and then another area over here, and so on. So that's going to be the modus operandi for the banks for the rest of this year. A lot of people in the data sets are going to get caught when these regional banks go down because they won't have access to their cash. Some of the banks won't recover, and it'll be really a nasty situation.
Will that be one of those banks be somebody like Wells Fargo, who had all Wells Fraud Go, that were committing all this fraud? They fired some big execs a few weeks ago, but they were they must have been capital impaired, in my opinion, because they wouldn't be committing massive fraud if they were doing that. Is something like Wells Fargo, could that bank like that be involved in your data sets? Is that a possibility?
It is in there. It is showing. We see that their response is amputation. So the data sets actually show some of the, let's say, the top 20 insolvent banks around the planet, everything from Royal Bank of Scotland all the way over to Bank of America, formerly Bank of Sicily, and Wells Fargo. And in this case, they'll get divisions that will be the sacrificial limb. So you're quite correct. They're in a liquidity squeeze, and their approach is going to be to chop off an arm in order to try and save the organization and slow the bleed out. So they're not going to collapse all at once, but big chunks of them, they may just decide to write off all the Wells Fargo branches in, some region and try and isolate it that way. I don't know how it will actually play out at a detail level, but the word for the large banks is self-amputation.
So this is very important for you to be able to check your bank and be in the strongest bank locally that you can be in, that isn't going to be involved in derivatives or schemes or stuff that so checking your bank and making sure that you have a strong bank is going to be important, because you're saying the whole system isn't going to come down all at one time. It's going to be sequential.
Correct.
It's going to be waves.
But also there's the rub, though, is that no bank is really safe because of the interbank lending practices of these past 30 or 40 years. So checking your bank to see if they're safe is kind of I don't know how you would measure that. One thing maybe to do would be to get into savings and loans and credit unions as opposed to regular commercial banks that may have exposure that way. So it's just going to be really difficult to see what is stable and what isn't. I know, for instance, here we've had gone through an episode as a result of the 2008 crises when a number of our local regional banks were and local to the city banks were consolidating just to get the credit and capacity that they need. And I suspect that same thing would naturally try to occur at this point in time, but we won't be able to. In other words, the regional banks won't be able to be absorbed by the big guys because the big guys won't have the capacity, nor will the regionals be able to absorb each other and form something larger, because there's just not going to be any funding for it, because fundamentally we're in a deflationary episode.
So people are just going to lose their money in some of these banks. They're just not going to, they're going to close and not be able to open up. There won't be enough FDIC money to pay everybody off.
Correct. That's quite clearly in the data. And we're all at great risk of that. It can go at any time in any given region. The saving grace, so to speak, is that it doesn't show as being national all in a day. So in that sense, it's not like Bill Holter's idea that it will spread that rapidly. It's as though they're actually going to be able to do some level of containment and isolate these regions, and then attempt, that's at least the theory or thinking on their part, attempt to clean up those regions with the idea that the other regions are safe behind some kind of a wall. And it just isn't going to quite work that way. It'll keep spreading around, and it's going to be ongoing. Once it starts, and it may have already. We saw the shutdown of several banks in Texas the other day for a period of time that was being blamed on a computer glitch. And it may be less of a computer glitch than in a loan that didn't come through on the credit level of stuff. But once it starts here, it'll keep just bouncing around the planet until eventually all of the banking system has been affected, more or less. I mean, we actually do have there's some good banks, so to speak. I mean, we get I'm laughing, but it's just because there was this little bank that showed up in Malta and another little one in Ireland that are going to be like the last two standing sort of thing at the end of this little episode of these next couple of years.
I want to get into what you said in February, that we're going to be entering a period of chaos. Well, we're entering a period of chaos. And I just had on David's document, it says we're going to get a hard stop into the debt ceiling on March 15th. That's in less than 2 weeks. Also, the Federal Reserve is meeting on March 15th. And they're talking about now Wall Street is handicapping them a 90% chance to raise interest rates, which I think is wacky. Is this part of does the Trump rally stop right here and now in the month of March? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, if you're defining the Trump rally as this stock market euphoria that's being pumped up by the Exchange Stabilization Fund, then pretty much. Our data shows that the chaos that really, as we now know, starts in mid-March or escalates in mid-March and runs very aggressively through May. Will indeed be that kind of an event for our quote stock market. But I don't define a Trump rally that way, okay, because I don't see it that way. I see everything from these emotional sums. And so it's quite clear in my data sets, seeing these numbers pop up, that the Trump rally is going to keep on going for several years and has absolutely nothing to do with this dying legacy system that's built around the dollar. In my viewpoint, the Trump rally can be best expressed in the rising price of Bitcoin, and it can be best expressed in its following alternative currencies as well, the other light cryptos.
Hold on a minute. I just want to jump in here. So the stock market may indeed crash, But the euphoria around Trump and the rally around Donald Trump and the ideas of Donald Trump, make America great again, make America first, honest business, go after the pedophiles, whatever it is, you think that's going to go on for years to come?
Correct, quite correct. That what we have here is, in a surfing analogy, we've paddled into the wave. We're right up there. We're at the crest, and we're now getting ready to stand up on the board. And so we have indeed committed ourselves emotionally at a generational level to change, real change. And they tried to co-opt the change with Obama, because they knew this wave was coming, and they were trying to work the numbers in their psycho-social historical way.
Which was his mantra was hope and change.
Hope and change, correct. See, they knew that this change wave was coming. They knew that this intergenerational change was coming. They were just trying to get out ahead of the wave. They're not surfers, though, guys. So they don't realize you can't force timing that way. And so it was doomed to fail. So now what we're going to have is we're going to have the legacy system. This idea of all these paper shares and 401ks and all this kind of stuff is going to crumble behind us as we move forward with this intergenerational change and the rebuilding of America. And it is to Trump's credit as timing that it will be labeled with him all to hell and gone on this intergenerational change. But he's just a really good surfer on the wave that all of us are riding. So he's not particularly creating it. He's now our symbol for the unleashing of it, if you will.
Ah, really good surfer. So he's going to be. So you're basically, your data sets are saying Trump will be successful. They will not derail him just because of that. He can understand the wave that's coming, and he's going to ride it. You're saying he will be successful.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of admiration for him as a temporal surfer, as someone who really does grasp this overused word of the zeitgeist. I don't like that word so much, but it's accurate that he grasped the emotional intensity values of the moment, and he's surfing them, and he's a very good time surfer, if you will.
And also the reason why he comes out and he keeps calling the media out, which is, I worked in the mainstream media, and I did real news in the mainstream media. I did stuff that could get us sued. I exposed things, but they got rid of people like me, and I wasn't the only person. There was lots of good people they got rid of. But this is why he's out calling fake news. This is back to you saying, okay, if you stand there and take it, you'll lose. But you say, oh, no, you're fake news. No, you're very fake news. So you're saying that tact is working for Donald Trump.
Oh, there's no question about that. Actually, the emotional intensity values that I get relative to all aspects of this change in the new administration are up about 24% in the last month's processing. So if we were to look at it as a popularity poll for success, then we're probably somewhere around 74% total.
The CNN, which sheepishly did a poll, came out and said, and this is gonna buttress with what you just said, because I just had it on my weekly news wrap up, and they said they did a poll and 78% either liked it a lot or liked it somewhat of what Trump said in front of Congress. 78%.
Yeah, that would certainly fit with my numbers.
That jives with your numbers, right?
Right, and I've got direct emotional nuances in there around individual words, and I'm just giving you an aggregation of it. Like I say, just a guesstimate, I would have said somewhere around 74% was a pretty solid positive emotional response. This I haven't seen in USA population ever in my work, ever.
So does that scare the daylights out of the deep state and the Democrats that he is popular and they're dangling in the wind, basically? Let's
not join the deep state and the Democrats, okay? And let's even separate the Democrats from the progressives that took them over. But the progressives, the progressive ruling elite, are indeed very scared. I don't think the deep state cares that much. I don't consider it to be monolithic at all. The deep state has some serious issues around its own survival, and it's at the level of the guidance for the deep state, it's very concerned with that. But I don't think the deep state per se is anti-Trump. I actually think the majority of the deep state is pro-change and therefore is pro-Trump. And they're having to deal with the same infestation in their subset of society as we are in our larger society.
I want to move on to gold and silver and Bitcoin. And you, again, I want to go back to your last report. Said chaos coming. Well, what do we have? Chaos. I mean, you know, the Democrats are trying to get Jeff Sessions to step down. You know, Obama's got his organization. You know, his organization OFA. Is that what it is? AOF. I don't know. Whatever
Right.
it is. You know,
Let's not assign words to those letters.
Well, I mean, but he's got his change group. I can't remember what the acronym is, but anyway, he's got all these group of people that are going to be protesting against Trump and trying to suppress First Amendment rights. I guess is the way I look at it. But is this is the part of the chaos you're talking about, and it is going to be reflective in gold and silver and Bitcoin. You said Bitcoin would go up, and sure enough, it sure did.
Yeah, we passed a major temporal milestone here, which was Bitcoin crossing over the value of gold in US dollar terms. And that was a temporal marker for movement in silver. Unfortunately, at the moment, they've stomped on silver in terms of the price, but I think that's actually kind of very enlightening, because it now shows us where the mark in the sand is. And so I think we can be very supportive of Bill Murphy of GATA, who's saying that, well, at this point, I think he said it was like $18.20 or some number he had. But within the $18 range, I've got a lot of emotional support here saying that the powers that be are very much afraid of it breaking over that level. And they actually fear its breakout as being uncontrolled once it does go over that level. So we're right there. We have the emotional chaos on their side. We have the building emotional chaos at a political level, insofar as the dying political elite are concerned. Now, here's where my data would disagree with their assessment. They are of the opinion, because they're so isolated, that they sit in their vast urban centers surrounded by millions of people just itching to rise up against the tyrannical Trump regime, and that further that there's this unspoken mass of supporters out in the great flyover states to aid them in this effort. And that's at least their narrative that they've got running at the moment. Some of those involved may understand that they're actually at best going to fight a losing guerrilla battle, but there is no emotional support for this. The intergenerational emotional support for the thing is waning. So with the emotional levels we saw in December that provided the impetus for the support are down about a third.
In this most recent drop.
Exactly, in this most recent processing. And so if the trend continues, by the time we reach the hiatus, or the early part of June, where the chaos kind of abates for a little bit economically, during that period of time between now and then, we might lose another third of the emotional push for this. So that's where we're actually seeing this turning going on, and that accounts for our new rise in the support numbers for the administration as a whole. It's awful hard to argue with success, even if you're just hearing the rumors of the success in the form of the pedophiles being arrested, etc. And I'm glad, I'm glad. Let me intrude and say I'm very, very pleased that we have this soft voice approach to the arrests and so on, and that it's proceeding as it is, because this is the way in which serious people conduct business.
And you think that top people are going to go down with this? I mean, top big name people.
1/3 of our broadcast media personalities, according to our data sets, I'm 30% to somewhere up to maybe 40%. Of those famous faces, is how the data sets describe them, will either be arrested or will flee the country. So that's how that's what either due to their own actions or to supporting the actions of others that are going to get them into trouble. So we've got a lot of data in there that says, that these people are actually going to flee the country and seek asylum elsewhere.
And this is all because, and this is why they're fighting. I'm sorry, I'm circling back, but this is why they're fighting so hard. The media is fighting so hard, because some of the top people in the media know they're up to their necks with sex trafficking and pedophilia. Either they are doing it, or they know about it and are helping other people cover it up. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. They have a skin in the game, and that skin is hurting already, and they're afraid of getting it sliced off.
Wow, that's big. And then tell me about the price of silver. You're saying that the price of silver is going to actually, at some point, and I know you're a big fan of Bitcoin because it's much harder to manipulate, But you're saying that the price of silver is going to go way higher, faster, maybe not more price-wise, but it's going to go up faster than gold and even Bitcoin. Explain
Correct. Correct. Silver's got a very interesting future ahead of us because for a number of years, it's going to be increasingly a key component of increasing complex hyper technologies. And so the growth rate, the projection of emotional attachment to silver escalates as we go forward, even out into 2022, which is about as far as I trust my numbers on this. But basically what's going to happen is the silver will break out this year. The manipulation will shift and end for a bit. They'll try and ratchet it back in, and then they'll fight this slippery upward from our viewpoint on price battle as they try and suppress the price, but every day they'll lose a little bit of their ability to suppress, and it'll just keep going on like that through this year. Then as we get up to the end of the year, somewhere, let's say October-ish, we'll get another breakout, and they may not be able to contain it at that point because of what's going to be coming out relative to technology then. And so the desperate need for silver will become dramatically evident to people all around the planet. And we actually have language of a great silver dishoarding over 2018 and 2019 in many Western countries where the governments, and via corporations who are seeking to make a profit, send people out to assay and purchase silver in the form of old silver plate, silver any way that it can be stripped off of anything, even getting to the point of buying old film stock chemicals, these kind of things, just to recover the silver. It'll become that precious as we go forward because of the many conflicting uses for it. The technologies, the hyper technologies, which will be energy related, and then the spin-offs that will be related to health, and then the monetization. Now, in the longer term,
and wait, I just want to interrupt you 1 minute.
Sure.
In the longer term, your data. Hold that thought. So the price would have to be astronomical if they're trying to scrounge, silver off of film. The price would have to be astronomical. Am I wrong?
It's got to be at least as high as $600 an ounce because of the relationship of that particular temporal marker and that price that goes all the way back in our data to 2003. And so I think it'll be much higher than that, and it will escalate very rapidly towards parity with gold, and then it will basically get too expensive to use as money. It'll become a hyper rare, pretty much industrial chemical only over like these next few years. So that'll extend, as I say, at least out into the 2022 to 2024 range, and then we may get some kind of a change. But as of this point, it shows that silver mining becomes a very lucrative profession here 2019 onward, with the first mines just starting to show a little bit of stuff in the early 2020s due to new technology, not due to standard operating procedures.
And if silver is $600 an ounce at least, what does that put gold? 3, 2, 3, 4,000, 5,000? What does that put gold?
The next number we have for gold is about 4,800. Okay, so we show a slight pullback somewhere in the neighborhood of $4,800 US per ounce of gold. I would say that we're looking maybe before March of next year, just making a guesstimate about it because of it'll be 1/3 the value of Bitcoin at that point. So at the point that it does its pullback, it's a little complex, but in terms of how it shows up. But so say $4,500 would be about 1/3 of the value of Bitcoin at the time that gold is at that level. And this is when silver has already escalated that the amount of language devoted to it is more than double now. So that would imply, and also the language is spread beyond simply the business and the precious metals community. So it's much more what we might think of as a general population discussion. And that would imply that more than 1% of the populace is attempting to buy it. So I would suspect, again, that we're looking at well over $1,000 an ounce for silver at that point.
And $4,500 for gold, is that what you're saying?
4,800, and then it drops down about $300, and then the data shows that when it's dropped down to that point, just curiously, it happens to match for a brief period of time exactly 1/3 of the price of Bitcoin when gold does that little dip, and then it's back up again.
So I mean, you're telling Bitcoin's going to be $1,300, $1,400 an ounce 14,000 an ounce.
Thousands. $13,000 or $13,008 or something. I think that is the target that the data shows as of February of next year.
Oh boy. You're talking about exploding gold, silver, and Bitcoin prices. Exploding.
No, sorry. Bitcoin is simply escalating. It doesn't explode until 2019.
Oh, but gold and silver explodes and tries to catch up with Bitcoin, but it won't. Bitcoin just is on an arc where it's just going to continually go up.
Let me give you some shocking numbers here. If you just looked at it against Bitcoin, against existing stockpile of gold right now, and you recognize that they both had attributes that made them similar, there's one Bitcoin available on the planet for every 1,000 ounces of gold.
Oh boy. Huh. That's so yeah. Wow. And you can't can't you just manufacture more Bitcoin?
No, there's the finite limit of the 21 million that'll be created, and that's it. And thereafter, we have to really, thereafter in the Bitcoin community is when things get really interesting for us, because then we start mining through, so to speak, processing through all the decibits and millibits and spreading out the wealth around the planet. That's at least the Chinese approach, is that when the Bitcoins are all mined, then it becomes very interesting, because then you can actually do things with the money, so to speak, and the wealth that it represents in a way that we can't quite now, because the focus is on creating that next Bitcoin, as opposed to shoving more value further down, so to speak, into decibits and millibits.
And where do you think ultimately, in the 2020, 2025 range, where do you think gold and silver end up? In the years 2020, 2025, whatever, in that time frame?
Well, we don't have numeric values, okay? We rarely get those. We have emotional quantifiers that are applied. And so for silver, we have language that says that the people that are the silver stackers are going to have multiple generations in their families praise their names for being so smart, because these guys will be creating fortunes that will travel down several generations in a family. So that gives you some idea.
Wow, unbelievable. And I wanted to get into the nastiness, and I want to end up with, as I did last time, Antarctica and Mars. I will explain that in a minute. I wanted to go with this fighting retreat. That that the elite could pull economic dirty tricks. That's what I wrote down. Let me make sure I wrote this down. Economic dirty tricks. And they backfire. At least that's what I read in your report. Is that what we have coming? Economic dirty tricks. This is all part of the chaos.
Correct. And the reason they're going to backfire it's the same reason that the media tricks are backfiring on them now, as the population has evolved beyond the level of gaming that the power elite are capable of. They're stuck in an old style broadcast mentality, if you will, and they don't recognize that the individual access to information has led to a whole new generation and multiple generations that are a lot smarter and a lot more complex in their thinking. So the same kind of dirty tricks are not going to work anymore, and they're just going to backfire as they each are tried. So we'll see the attempt to shovel debt into populations backfire on the power elite. So there won't be another Ireland, for instance, where they're able to get the population to accept massive amounts of debts that are not legitimately owed, and so on. And in fact, many of the people now, as I say, are going to start getting together, and it may be the millennials that are basically now disenfranchised by the loss that the progressives forced them into over this election. But we show many of the younger people actually forming these collectives that are pouring through information, looking for ways in which, ways to get the truth out, if you will, but also ways to see about recovering some of the stolen value that had been leached out of these generations by the secrecy state.
And one last, I wanted to say too that probably half my audience is like 34, 35 and younger, which I'm surprised. I'm an old guy. But people are trying to, young people want the truth. I mean, they're more attuned to what's going on than older people. Am I wrong?
No, you're quite correct. Except I think your audience is much larger in terms of the demographics towards the millennial and post-millennial generations. I think a lot more young guys like watch your stuff than you would think. But you're quite correct about that. The complex mind is no longer satisfied with the simple edict of believe this because I tell you.
Okay. And last thing, I wanted to get this in. People are fascinated by this. I had Steve Quayle on, who wrote a couple of books on Antarctica, and you in your data sets came up with Antarctica and Mars connection. Can you tell me about the Antarctica Mars connection in your data sets?
There's actually many layers of the connection there between Mars and Antarctica. One of the chief things we're going to discover, though, is that when we get into Antarctica, and especially in the pyramids, is this relationship between pyramid culture here and on our planet, that we are now living in the remnant of that once great culture, and a pyramid culture that is on other planets in our solar system, Mars among them. And so the looking at the archaeology, so to speak, and the anthropology that will come out of Antarctica will give us an insight to what had occurred on Mars, and basically what was going on way back when that we just don't have a clue about.
We're talking about pre-flood stuff.
Oh, correct. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's just a lot we don't know about what happened before the flood. I mean, just a lot we don't know. Technology, are they going to reveal more technology? And that's part of the silver story. That is, the technology is going to be revealed, not just from Antarctica, but in all this technology that the deep state, that the powers that be, whatever, have been withholding. When that gets revealed, people are going to go, oh my gosh, we need silver, because all this technology is going to be revealed.
Correct. And we've actually even seen concrete, if you will, linguistic proof of this in the last two lines of the State of the Union speech, where Trump says the government has these suppressed technologies he wants to see get out. And yes, once the technology comes out, silver will be determined to be quite valuable, simply because it has this interesting characteristic as a metal. It has these two naturally occurring stable isotopes. This is very rare. Most metals have multiple stable isotopes. Gold only has one, tungsten has zero. And what we're going to discover, according to our data, is that with silver, we can create a state that's between those two stable isotopes and gets silver to be unstable, if you will, and enjoy all these fantastic properties as a result of that.
Cliff High, I just barely, I didn't get it. I didn't get to all my notes, but I will tell you that to people out there that the report's $15. This one is called "Watch This Space." I'm going to link to halfpasthuman.com. Just scroll down, watch this space as an end report. You have money back guarantees to people for. It's an unbelievable guarantee that you don't like it, I'll give you your money back, right? I haven't had a single all the time I've had you on, there must have been thousands and thousands of people that did come and watch you on either YouTube or my site. I haven't had a single complaint where something went wrong, where they didn't get their report, which is absolutely fantastic, really. So,
well, thank you very much, but that's how we do business all the time. If you don't like it, you don't have to pay for it.
I don't know how you couldn't like it. I'd have to. I mean, I could do 3 hours with you on this, and it would take me to really note it up. I'd probably have to do 4 or 5 hours of research. So, a lot in this report that I did not get to, a ton of it. But halfpasthuman.com, Cliff High is the man of the hour right here on USAWatchdog.com. Cliff High, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you very much. I'll see you in the future.
I hope so.
Yeah, I'm certain we will.
Yeah, man. It's gonna happen. Get some silver. Get some silver. When you got the cash, don't leave it lying around. Get the silver on down. You'll be a rich man, no question. How many people have seen this interview? Is just up, just 2,230. It's just up 30 minutes, but it's not exploded at all. Yes, just up 30 minutes. It's 1 hour ago, and there's 4,770 only now. You know it's coming down. Yeah, you know it is all coming down. If the thing is flying around, you know it's coming down. Don't leave your cash paper lying around. Get some silver now. Yeah. Get some silver. Get some silver now. Yes. No cat in the garden, no. It's crazy, it's all going to happen, yes. It's all going to happen. If he predicts it's just 10 days out, half of March, just 10 days. Get some silver now, just 10 days. Get some food maybe too. Get some tobacco, soap and blah blah oh. Yeah, prepare. Over and out.